Fielding is to help our graduates publish. And so three of our presenters today, I was their chair, and I'm so proud of them. And then Carrie Arnold, I actually don't know, Carrie, who your chair was at Fielding.
But Dr. Rogers.
Oh, Katrina was your, yeah, Katrina Rogers, our president, was her chair. And so you guys are models of what we want everyone to do. So let's see if I can get this slide going. Okay, good. So this is presented by Fielding Graduate University School of Leadership Studies, the Rocky Mountain Cluster. And Dr. Jenny Edwards, who's a professor at the School of Leadership Studies at Fielding, and particularly focusing on the EDD Leadership for Change. And Jenny, how long have you been with us at Fielding?
Many, many years.
Many, many years.
I mean, actually, I've started, I was asked to be a founding faculty member for the ELC program in 1995. And I graduated from the HOD program before that.
Right, so she's a model too, like the 4 presenters today. She's a alumni of Fielding and has published a lot. And then, you know, I'm Annabelle Nelson, for those of you who don't know me, a professor at the School of Leadership Studies. My primary home is a PhD in Human and Organizational Studies. And we want to do a shout out to Hillary Molina, the Director of Alumni Relationships. She did all the background. Now when you do Zooms and you have public people coming, there's FERPA issues, there's registration issues, and she did all that as well as publicizing it. So thank you, Hillary. Just want to say our norms for everyone, except for the presenter. If you can have your mic off and your video off. And a lot of people want to chat back and forth, and it's kind of distracting to the presenters. So I'd like you to hold chat, and then after each person presents, we'll have a Q&A time. And so please put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll try to map those. So thank you for adhering to those norms. So our presenters today, we have Carrie Arnold, PhD. You see the PhDs across there. She's the principal of the Willow Group, and she's a certificate program director for the evidence-based coaching program at Fielding Graduate University. And that is our strongest. We have concentration. Well, it's a certificate program, and then in the HOD PhD program across the university, it's a concentration. So it's one of our strongest programs. And I think we have a couple of graduates here at VBC, or maybe current students. We have Marcia Dougherty. Correct my pronunciation, Marcia.
Marcia Dougherty.
There we go. I worked with you how many years? Marcia, yes, 7. Marcia Dougherty. Did I get it right?
Hickory Dickory Dougherty.
Dougherty. Thank you for the mnemonic. Marcia Dougherty. She's a learning consultant at Island Health and a fellow at the Institute for Social Innovation at Fielding. And she's our Canadian representative today. We have Christina Caviani. She's Communications and Education Director of RISE, which is a nonprofit supporting survivors of sexual assault and intimate partner violence. And she's also teaching at San Luis Obispo Polytechnic. And we have Isabel Stevenson. She's the program coordinator for the Connecticut Center for School Change. And she's also a faculty at University of Connecticut. So without further ado, I'll stop sharing. And Christina, you're on.
Okay, bam, I'm here. Thank you for that introduction. Thanks for inviting me. It's wonderful. I don't get to do enough things with Fielding because my life right now, but I look forward to it. So this was a cool thing to get to be invited to. So thank you. Can you hear me okay? Everything's, yes? Okay, thank you, David. Good to see your face. Well, I'm excited to talk a little bit about my story of publishing. I still can't believe that it's happened. I still am like, oh, wow, that happened. I finished I still have moments where I'm like, I need to work on my dissertation. And I'm like, oh, I don't have to. Yes. So that feeling is always wonderful for those of you who are still in that path. I think my story kind of like starts and ends with really finding a person that I really felt connected to, that I wanted to go on that journey with, because publishing, it's really daunting. I was really insecure, thinking I wouldn't be able to do it, thinking, you know, there's going to be someone else smarter or whatever imposter syndrome we have. And so, you know, that person for me was finding Annabelle and meeting her and feeling, you know, a connection with her, that I wanted to go down that path where we could kind of like no BS, have quick, concise conversations, really lay out expectations, and that we were really on the same page in how we communicated with each other, and that we didn't have a really huge power dynamic between the two of us, which I love and learned from as well, with how to engage as someone in the academic world, where fielding is always allowing you to question, you know, hierarchy and egos and all of that within academia. So I met Annabelle at one of the winter sessions, and I think she became like my third mentor, and I loved my other ones as well. But it just clicked with us. I think David was at that session. It was about like Eastern epistemologies and different ways of learning, and I loved it. And my NSO, when I went through it in 2014, I was 5 months pregnant, and through my all of my fielding time, which I graduated in 2019 of January. I had, you know, I was pregnant, I had 2 children. So I was juggling a lot. I was really sleep deprived writing my dissertation, and really not hoping that it was going to amount to something. So having someone who was my person that really cared and was able to set timelines, and again, it was just easy, having an easy relationship with whoever you want to publish something with. And I did it with my dissertation topic. And so having that kind of both reciprocal interest in publishing together, and it's not necessarily that the person who you're going to work with has to have a specific exact interest in your area, but rather an interest in like one of the 10 areas, and that there is again reciprocity with both people. I wasn't going to do it alone, so I really was like, I need to have someone to walk me through it, because I was just, capacity wise, I didn't have it in me. I had a lot of questions. I was really nervous about it. So that was really my reason. I think it ended up happening, was that I had my person, Annabelle, to go to and to really think about how we could do this together. And that it was an easy, really compassionate relationship that, you know, just flowed easy peasy, which is hard to find, as I'm sure we all know. When we were starting to look at like, where should we publish this? What's the journal articles or journal sites, or, you know, whatever, where should we go? A lot of the questions that Annabelle asked me really helped me consider like, where do I want my future to be? Where are the conversations and people that I want to be having that conversation with, which I think you start talking about during your NSO. But looking at the journal articles I used in my dissertation helped. Reading just the first initial bio of a journal and seeing like, oh, that really feels like that's where I want to be. And immediately, a lot of them, it was like, no, no. And some of them, I was a stretch, and Annabelle and I could look in. She was like, is this really? And then I was like, no, I don't know. You know, so we kind of did a back and forth with narrowing it down between different journals, until Sex Education was the journal that was chosen, which is not a coincidence. It was really like, seems obvious now, because a lot of the work that I do with gender-based violence prevention, the start of that was my interest in trying to help people have healthier, communicative, respectful relationships. Unfortunately, we have so much work to do in like, violence and response, that's where I'm starting. But in the end goal, I'm hoping that we can be informing preventative ways to consider how to lower violence. And I was really interested in considering a new entry point into that conversation, because I think a lot of people shut down when you start talking about rape and sexual assault and domestic violence, which October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, in case you wanted to know. I have to always plug that. But I think it was really nice to see someone's enthusiasm in wanting to enter into that conversation in a new way. And so again, looking for journals that could really speak to my future. So where do I want to be in 10 years? And how do I want to impact education? So my whole thing was very education focused. And I also wanted to consider not just gender, I wanted to consider sexual behaviors and technology use within that. So my dissertation and research question was, what stories do Generation Z college men tell about the interaction between their smartphone use and their sexual intimacy and their behavior and attitudes? And so my research really was around how are young men specifically learning about sex and how through their smartphones and their devices, and how does that inform who they will be when they're older and the types of relationships they will have. So a lot of the themes that I came up with through the stories that I heard through my research, they were profound. They were very telling of where I see us going in the future, of wanting to educate all youth about the use of smartphones and how it impacts their sexual development. So I just focused on males because males are most likely to harm. And also many young males have been harmed as well. So there's, this idea of, someone can be someone who harms and also be harmed themselves. And then I also think society takes a role in creating opportunity for people to end up being people who harm. And the smartphone is one of those examples. So, and there's a lot of discussions around it. The Social Dilemma is a movie on Netflix now, and a lot of people are questioning it and considering it, but it's still, I can say, an area that people are wanting to hear more of. So I was excited when we, submitted our introduction letter and we submitted information to the journal and they were interested in it. And then from there, we went on the mission of editing, looking at the submission guidelines for any journal. Is, you look through that, there's usually a checklist. So it's pretty straightforward. I'd say, at least with the journal that I chose, which is part of this larger conglomerate of Taylor and Francis. And so their submission guidelines are straight up right there. You kind of watch everything you have to do. And again, there's mistakes happening, but you're just like with your dissertation, you're fixing it, going back, narrowing it down. I definitely can say that there was a lot of, like, I don't know how to say it in a nice way, but there was a lot of like ego involved in it that Annabelle and I were like, okay, we're gonna keep going with this, even though the way that it was written was a little bit frustrating, but it was like, we don't have time for that. Let's just keep going. And that it almost we got a sensing of like, is this going to be published? And then all of a sudden it was. So it was almost like they're not there motivating you, at least in my experience, my one little experience. They're not like, yeah, you got this. It's very close. You're doing great. Like we're very excited. It's kind of like, well, we'll see. That was kind of the vibe we were getting in their emails with us. And so once we had gotten that far, we were like, we're going to do all of it to like go to the end to make all the edits possible. And so then once it got accepted, it rolled really fast. And that was really exciting to see that happen. Not that we were surprised, because I'm still standing by that it was amazing information that I think really should have been shared long in an international journal, which the Sex Education is an international journal. And most of the editors I think we were working with were in Australia. And so that was really exciting. So we were willing to go through that. It took like 5 months, realistically, 5 or 6 months. And again, because of their tone, I wasn't like, for sure this is going to get published, but it did. And I don't know if that's how they kind of, that there's no frills, or just like get this done style, but that's at least how they were with us. And then from that, after it was published, it was, for me personally, like, it made me just validate that my knowledge and what I researched was, uh, I was smart enough to do it. I proved it to myself. I felt, that I had found an amazing partner to do it with, and that if I had enough time at this moment, I would be wanting to write a book with Annabelle and do it with her. I still feel like if I want to do it again, I still want to do it with someone, because I think that just helps me with setting timelines and being really realistic with the timelines. With Annabelle, we did that. And it was just like, okay, we had like a 10-minute call to be like, okay, you do that, I do that, and we'll connect in a week. Okay, bye. And so that was really nice, again, to just be really clear with the expectations. It never was like, oh man, here I am doing all this, because we were communicating, and from the start we could communicate what our capacity was, which was really nice. So personally, I got to prove, and know inside of myself, like, man, this is an international journal. I can't say anything bad about myself and what I researched. It helps me build that connection with Annabelle to be able to write together. And then, really be able to showcase what I'm passionate about on that level was not something that my dissertation would have done. So the fact that I can now, put that on my resume, helps me professionally, helps bulk obviously my resume, and my ability to at some point look for professorships at a university. I'm a lecturer at Cal Poly right now, which is great. I got to submit the article because they do a call for if you've published anything. And I was like, yes, I have actually. So that is exciting. And it also gave me a lot of ability to back my my desire to start this conversation of gender-based violence with new entry points. So in my communities of working in anti-violence work and being able to integrate that, we have a blog for Rise. We're posting my journal article there. And just, I think it really helps to, if I have more time, it would help with networking, with being able to showcase my work and my entry point in, and I think that that's going to continue as I move forward, because it still feels like relatively new, even though, it's been a while because of COVID time. Time's all strange, but yeah, I think personally and professionally, it's helped me bring more awareness of the topic, which I spent so many years working on, that it's a tangible and easily accessible way to showcase the work. So I can send that link, or I can send that PDF to, and I did, to people I know and love, because, everyone after you finish, not everyone, but a lot of people after you finish your dissertation are like, oh, what is it about? Can I read about it? And you're like, I can't send you this 500 page or whatever, 250 page document. So the article allows you to create a quick version of what you research that's tangible for, most people. It's still not like a, New York Times article, but it's still a amount of writing and reading that you could definitely do within an hour. And so that's been nice to be able to widely share my research, because once your dissertation is done, it feels like, now what? Is this over, all this work I did? Like, who's going to read all the work I've just put into it? So I'm really stoked. And I still think it is like an evolving thing that's going to keep continuing, that I'll be able to utilize that for my professional career and for wherever I go next. I did have a colleague from San Jose State reach out to me who saw my article saying, I'd love to write something with you and Annabelle, and that was awesome. So that kind of what is this, like, domino effect? That was my hands. Is what I think the purpose of it was. So I saw the purpose come to fruition, and yeah, that's it. I'm so happy I did it. Thank you to all of my mentors that are here today. I can only see Annabelle and David, but if there's others, thank you. I'm so appreciative of, I wouldn't be able to have done it without you. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Christina. And I'm going to ask the same question of everyone. And also, we do have the norm for no chatting right now, just so we're not diverting our attention. But we'll have time to chat when we open it up to Q of A, and you can do the private chat now if you want to talk to individuals. But I'm going to ask this: how many rewrites, once you started talking to the publisher, in this case a journal, how many rewrites did you do?
I think we did 4 or 5.
Okay, great. So it's an effort. It's not like, oh, I did great work and it's going to be published, right? Okay,
Right.
thank you so much, Christina. And our next presenter is Marcia Daugherty. I got it right, Dr. Daugherty? You're still muted.
No, Doherty.
Dougherty, how many years? Anyway, forgive me, please forgive me.
I forgive you, Annabelle. You're a great mentor. You can do no bad with me. Okay, so I have a little presentation. You're not going to be, how come I can't share? Oh, I guess I don't have it set up for sharing in this one.
You should be able to. Hold on 1 second, Marcia.
Marcia, you should be able to share now.
Yeah, should be able to. Sorry about that.
Okay, let me try again. There we go. Thank you. Okay. So I'm Dr. Marcia Doherty, and I'm a learning consultant with the Island Health, which is a health authority, and a fellow in the Institute for Social Innovation. And I'm coming from the beautiful lands of the Lekwungen speaking people. And on the background, which is Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And in the background, you can see the Coast Salish Sea. And I'm actually coming from you right there on the 7th floor of that building. So you're not going to like my story of how I publish, because I was invited to publish. It was my dissertation, and I had not paid to have my dissertation open access. And the editor of the Diagnosis magazine, he was doing a special edition on social cultural learning, and he did a lit search, and because of my keywords in my dissertation, he found it. He didn't have access to it, so he reached out to me to talk to me. And that was really fortuitous, because it was a really nice conversation. He got to know me a little bit, and I shared my dissertation with him. And then he reached out to me to invite me to publish in this special edition. And I submitted my first draft, and it was I got terrible feedback. And I'm sure if I had been publishing with any other journal, they would have probably not invited me back, but he did work with me, and I got it. He actually shared some of the other articles so that I could align my paper closer to the other articles that were published, and we got it published. And so this is the first paper that I published since graduating, which was 2017, January 2017. I still have one more paper from my dissertation that I actually need to publish, but I'm procrastinating. And I could probably find 2 more different articles from my dissertation that I could publish. But I want you to know that this isn't the first article I published. I actually, this is my 7th. Just like Christina was saying, connections are really important for getting published. And the biggest connection that I made was at Fielding with Tojo Thatchin-Carey. And I joined him in the International Conference of Management Cases in India. And from that, I did that twice. And from that, I got 4 publications, a book chapter and a journal article. And that was really a nice experience to do because it's meant for doctoral students. And so you get a really good peer review done because it's other faculty, and it's faculty in Canada, Finland, UK, the US, Australia, and India. So you get a really nice international perspective, and you really learn the process of how to edit your paper and provide the changes in a way that will have faster uptake and approval. And then you also go through a really rigorous editing process. And then you go through, when you get invited to publish it into a journal, you have to rewrite your article and make it 80% different. And so that's a really unique exercise as well. So I really recommend that. And now that with COVID, you can actually do this on Zoom, so you don't have to actually go to India. But I love going to India, so I highly recommend it. And the turnaround times for these were really tight as well, so you learned to work really fast. So 4 of those publications were through the International Conference of Management Cases. Then what happened is while I was doing a paper for my 3rd level research course, I had a book that had been published in the 90s that I really liked. And it was really out of date. And I was looking at the editors, and one of the editors actually lived in the same city that I did. And so I reached out to her, Lynn Curry, and she met me for tea. And we started talking about our research interests. And she introduced me to the American Educational Research Association, and we started talking about redoing her book. And in that process, she taught me how to use conferences to start testing your papers to make sure that you've got the right uptake and you're doing something that the audience wants to hear. And we did a pre-conference workshop together, and from that we were able to publish the 3rd article, Implementing Competency-Based Education, which has actually made me the most read researcher at my organization on ResearchGate, which I'm quite impressed with. And then the number 2 article, that was something I did on the side. I should have made it my dissertation, but I didn't. And then the top article is my dissertation. So I did all of this while I was doing my PhD studies and working full time, which is why I was so cranky, Annabelle. And then while I was doing that, I was doing conference presentations, and the bold are the conference presentations that I went to support these publications. And so I went to about 20 different presentations. And the bottom ones in the gray, the first ones, the 5 that I did, those are when I did my master's degree. So I only did 5 from my master's degree, and I did about 20 from the PhD. And what I started to find is I triangulated where I could be presenting, and my research is in higher education. So I looked at teaching and learning in higher education conferences. My research is in the health professions and specifically medicine. So there is the medical education conferences and professional conferences. And then I also presented at research methodology conferences like the International Conference on Management Cases and a Phenomenology Conference. So to get more uptake, you can go across different domains and industry professions to get that. And the point of going to these is to really see what the uptake is, to see what parts of your argument are not sitting well with the audience, to understand what kind of questions are coming out of your argument. And so it's really to kind of identify issues and start to smooth your presentation, smooth your writing. And so from a lot of these conferences, you can start to build your paper. And so it kind of gets you motivated for that. And then it also makes you not so surprised when you get some of the written feedback when you actually submit your article, because sometimes it can be contradictory. It can seem not very nice. And you can sort of wonder, what do you want to do? So then when you do get feedback, you are prepared. The other big thing I think that really has helped me publish is participating as a peer reviewer. So as a doctoral student, I volunteered for conferences to do peer review conferences, and they're always looking for people to do this work. And you got to see the caliber of the writing and the arguments that were coming in. You got to see a lot of things that worked well and things that didn't work very well. And and because you had to give feedback on it, you started to figure out where the flaws might be in someone's argument in the way they were presenting their paper. And then since graduating, I've now being a reviewer in a couple of journals. And again, it's quite interesting to read it, because often the first time I read an article, I go, oh, this is a great article. And then when I start looking at it closely, I start to see, oh, they didn't do this. Oh, they don't even have a research question. Things like this. And it makes the peer review feedback, the review feedback that you get on your own article, it makes it less emotional and less painful. It's not so in your face, because people are trying to be nice, and you recognize it sort of gets you a step back too, so that you don't take your work so personally, and you realize that you really have to figure out how to argue your case, how to make a good argument, how to have a great warrant that people want to hear for uptake. So that's sort of, Christina outlined a really intentional way of publishing, and I went at this very unintentionally and a very kind of different pathway to do it. But I'm really happy with that. And what really makes me happy is the story of Peter Higgs. And I'm not sure if you're aware of Peter Higgs, but he discovered one of the half that discovered the Higgs boson particle in 1964, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Science in 2013. And he's published less than 10 articles. So I kind of want to be like him. And that's sort of my presentation right now. I don't know if I've got enough time.
That was excellent. Dr. Doherty, I got it right?
Yes.
Dr. Doherty. Yeah, so your last article, what I really love about what you're talking about is, you got to have a tough ego to publish and realize, I know for my little story from grad school, I just realized you want to communicate to this specific article. So if you get torn apart, you're not communicating that article. So it's more of a transaction versus your worth. I've had journals say, I don't know who would want to read this, right? So it can be really tough. So your last article that you were invited to submit, how many revisions did you do?
Just one, actually, but it was it was a major revision. Like, it did not look at all like the paper I submitted. And that's something I notice with.
So you did one revision, but it was huge. Is that what you just said?
huge.
Yeah, because of the feedback from the reviewers.
And sometimes the feedback isn't good, but you can tell that they're niggling over something.
Right. Yeah.
And-
You're not communicating, or you're not matching their subculture of publishing.
And their understanding of the problem, because we're immersed in it. And so we sometimes come in at step 10 instead of step 1.
Uh-huh.
And so you have to go back but I've noticed as a reviewer, I'll send something back for major revisions, and when I get it back, there's not been major revisions done.
Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. And a lot of you that are working on your dissertations, like I don't know, I do this as a committee member or chair, but I have them write the comments from their committee, and then over on the other side, write what they did about it in and the page number. I know I had one article that the first reviewer loved it. The second reviewer, I think he had what I call graduate studentitis. It was like, how critical can I be? There were like 40 points. So I made this really elaborate chart. But anyway, okay, thank you. And I think you're going to go past 10 articles. I'm not quite sure, but I think you are.
I want
Okay,
the Nobel Prize.
yeah. Okay, now we're going to switch to publishing books. And we're so delighted and happy to have Dr. Carrie Arnold here. And I believe either Hillary or Jenny will have to allow her to share her screen.
And I don't need to share the screen until the end. So I think I actually have access already. So thank you, Annabelle. Can I just get a thumbs up? Someone take themselves off or put your video on so I can know I'm being heard. You guys hear me? Okay, great. Thank you, Christina. It was so interesting to hear the journal article journey. My journey was very, very different. And so I'll share a little bit about it from an academic perspective, and then I'll share a little bit about my journey from just a practitioner perspective. And I think, Annabelle, your quote on, I don't know if it takes ego, if it takes insanity, I don't know what it takes, but it definitely takes some grit and some resilience to put yourself into the pipeline of publishing. And I did my PhD at Fielding. My dissertation was on women in leadership who felt silenced. And I started doing conference presentations before my dissertation was finished. So I agree with the two previous presenters. Being in conferences is important, and it doesn't have to be an academic conference. For those who are listening in, I did a lot of presentations for the International Coach Federation. I did a lot of conferences for the Institute of Coaching, which is the Harvard sort of arm of coaching. I did a lot of local conferences. I did conferences that I had to pay to speak, and then I did conferences where I actually got a free admission. When you're doing these academic conferences, it's on your own dime. And so that's the other thing you have to be prepared for. By doing those conferences, I had this audience that was interested in this topic of silencing. It was before the Me Too movement had really become strong. And when I would get the people standing in line after my presentation asking me questions, that inspired me to stay in my topic. And so when I finished my dissertation and defended it in December of 16, I took a break because I was dissed out with my dissertation. But I came back to Fielding after taking a break, became a fellow with the Institute for Social Innovation, and I reopened my IRB, my Institutional Review Board application, which is what we need to interview human beings for our research. So I went back into my research. I tripled my sample size and stayed in my topic. And when I was finished with that research a year later, I was like, what do I do with all this content? And what drove me back into the research was some of the questions that were being raised at conferences, such as, is this silencing factor the same in this industry as this industry? What about generations? What about this? What about that? I'm like, good question, good question. Like my dissertation research, I only had 22 participants. Like I couldn't honestly answer some of those questions. So that's what drove me back in. And from an academic perspective, you then have all this data, and what do you do with it? And I could have gone the journal route, but my audience of coaches, my audience of leaders in organizational development, they're not going to be reading the academic journals as much as they might be reading a book. So I chose to go the book route. And I did that because I wanted to honor all of the stories of the close to 70 women that I had spent time with, interviewing and transcribing and making sense of their stories. And I couldn't do that sufficiently in a journal article. So I took the book approach. I hired a literary coach to just a couple sessions just to kind of help me get a sense of, I don't even know what to do here. She ended up being my agent, and I signed a contract with her. I finished the book in about a year, and then she and I, while I was finishing the book, this is the hard part for those who go the book route. You have to do a book proposal to get your idea in front of publishers. And that book proposal at times felt like I was writing a dissertation. How I had to describe why I was an expert in this, why they should publish my work. I had to submit several chapters of the book that were already written. It was a process. And her and I had conversations around, if you're not careful, you'll spend all your time as a writer trying to do your book proposal and you won't write your book. So that was hard for me to navigate. The proposal got finished, and with her help, she started submitting it to publishing houses. I don't know how many rejections I got. I think she sheltered me a little bit, but I can definitely say I was rejected more than 20 times. After a year of her trying, my book is sitting in a manuscript form on my laptop. I decided I'm done waiting. I want to get this out into the world. I want it to have legs. And so I spoke to my agent and I said, I want to fire you and I want to be released from this contract. And she said, give me one more month. And I said, okay. I gave her one more month, nothing happened. And so I hired my own editor. I created my own publishing company to start the path of self-publishing. After I was about 6 weeks into that process, my agent called me back and said, guess what? A publisher now wants your book. And so I had to make a decision. Do I continue the self-publishing route, which I had already invested some of my own resources into, or do I go with Rowman and Littlefield? And I decided to go with Rowman and Littlefield and let them publish the book. I shouldn't say lost. I signed over the rights of my book to a publisher. And so that's important for people to understand that if you have a publisher who's publishing your work, it's actually no longer your work once you sign a contract with them. And that means a few different things for me that I didn't think I understood up front. It meant that I had to fight really, really, really hard on what the book would be titled. I had to fight really, really hard on what the book would look like simple things that you wouldn't think about, because they wanted it to look a certain way and they wanted it to have a title that I didn't want. And so there was a tension there. We worked through it and I'm really happy with the title and I'm really happy with the cover, but those were things that I wasn't expecting to have to negotiate. Because I don't own the book anymore, I will only get royalties when it sells. And I have no idea how the book is doing. It came out in July. I'll get my first royalty check next year, next summer. They gave me a very small advance. It was small. If Starbucks was still open, it might cover, my coffee needs for a while, but it was not a huge advance. And so the process took a long time. By the time, I had signed a contract with an agent to the time the book was released, it was close to 2 years. Excuse me. And so had I gone the self-publishing route, I could have had it out much sooner. And so those are the things that I think it's really important when people are trying to identify what route they want to go. Because I had hired my own editor, she had already edited the book by the time I turned it over to the publisher. So the good news was there were very, very few changes I needed to make in the manuscript, but we did go back and forth. I didn't have to do any major rewrites, but there was some. The hardest part really wasn't the rewrites. It was around the cover art and what to title the book. However, this one thing I think is important for people to think about is when you do have a publisher, a traditional publisher, your book will be in libraries. And for me, that was important. I wanted my book to be in a library. When you self-publish, you typically can't get your book into libraries. My book is also on all online platforms and indie bookstores. You know, it's not going to be in the brick and mortar necessarily, but that's okay with me because most people aren't buying in stores these days. So, you know, I've been in conversations with people like, well, should I go the traditional route or should I self-publish? It's really not a choice you make. The choice you're making is, do I attempt to do the traditional approach or do I save all my energy and just self-publish? And I think Fielding helped me understand that there's different ways you can self-publish. And so I learned a lot about buying my own ISBN. I learned a lot about vanity publishers versus creating your own publishing company and all of those types of things. And it was really helpful. But I think setting aside all of the logistics, what made this book come out, yes, a little bit of my resilience, but it was really people saying, I need to read this book. Like, I really want to better understand your research. So I felt like I had a social responsibility at some point to say, the selfish approach would be to give up because this is super, super hard. And I don't know if I have the resilience. But the socially just thing was to stay in it until the book had its legs and it's out in the world. And I'm happy it's out in the world. COVID certainly put everything at risk because when the pandemic hit, the book hadn't actually been like created yet. Like it was still on someone's computer, you know, in its print form. So I wasn't sure, like, will New York open up or will the places in the East Coast that are supposed to create the book open up? But thankfully they did. And yeah, so that's sort of my story. And I know there'll probably be questions and I'm happy to answer those towards the end. But I think what I appreciate about what Fielding helped me with is that I didn't have yes, Dr. Katrina Rogers was my chair and I love her. She's the president of Fielding, but she and my committee were tough on me. And I'm thankful they were tough on me because they made me a better writer and they made me a better researcher. And I have published in I have published in magazines and I've published book chapters. More on the practitioner side, I have been invited to write an academic article for one of the APA journals, and I've started that process. And then I'm remembering this is really hard to be an academic writer. I think it's a lot easier to be a practitioner writer, and so I think that's probably more my bent. Is I'll probably stay on that side of it because I've signed with a publisher. They have first rights of what is it called? They own me. So if I write another book, they have like 6 weeks to say we want it, and after that I can go somewhere else. But I have this obligation to stay with a publisher. And I think our first speaker, Christina, said this. They are the least customer service oriented industry on the planet. They are not cheerleaders. They make it tough. So I'll pause there, and thanks, Annabelle, for the opportunity to share the experience.
Yeah, Carrie, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. And they've talked about networking, two of our earlier presenters. I mean, your book, you don't know how well it's doing, but has there been any networking that's resulted? I mean, has anyone contacted you or?
Yeah, I've been contacted by a lot of strangers, and that's so much fun is when I get an email from someone I've never met saying, I actually read your book cover to cover and here's what it meant to me. I also have, part of what the publisher required me to do was build my own platform.
Right.
You know, having a presence on social media, having a presence on LinkedIn. And so that is, you know, that community has been really supportive. And I think that's really important for those who want to publish, is that you have to build your network. You can't do it without that. And so I'm really thankful that I have other people who believe in the work as well. And without a lot of prompting on my behalf, they're out there talking about it.
Yeah, great. And I like what you said. I mean, it is a choice to self-publish or go with a publisher. I mean, I'm old enough that when I got my PhD in 1978. Do we believe that? It was really verboten to self-publish. It was like not seen as reputable. Now it's changed, and sometimes, yeah, and some books, like in fiction, self-publish and become a bestseller. But I still feel like you have to decide. I think you do have an edge of reputability. I'm having a hard time talking this morning, with a publisher. And as you say, they put it out on, like I published a book in 2014 with a publisher out of London. And the book proposal is huge. You have to actually do a marketing study. And they expect you to do all your own PR and start a blog and a website. And then these readings in bookstores that you all see, often you have to pay. Like I got my publisher to pay for a few, but I have a good friend at NAU and Flagstaff who published this book, The Pure Land. And she's everywhere, but she says it's almost a full-time job. So thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, and next we have Dr. Isabel Stevenson, who used to live in Colorado. So she worked in school districts, Thornton, I believe, just north of Denver. And she's, as all these other presenters, she's brilliant. She worked a lot with principals, and she knew there was something going on with the good principals who could help their teachers. And so she unlocked some of the implicit knowledge that principals have in training. So it's so wonderful to see you, Isabel, and I'll turn it over to you. And Hillary, please allow her to share.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to do this. This is so much fun. So it's just so interesting listening to everyone else as well, because we all have our own stories. So, you know, like someone's talking about conferences. I hate conferences. I never go to conferences. That's not how I want to connect with people. But a lot of these other things I think we have in common. So I put together some slides. I hope I get this right. So you should see. No, that's not what I want. Oh yeah, maybe it is. Okay, this is fine. This is just my list of publications, and I think what I'm going to do is put in the chat whenever I can find that at some point, a link to these slides, just on the off chance that you actually care enough to click on any of these, and that would be lovely. I guess also a lot of this has to do with what your goals are, right? So I did actually turn my dissertation into a research article, and I did submit it, but only to one journal. And then when it was rejected, I just kind of like, I just wasn't really prepared to put in the effort to do anything else with it. Because I don't know, it just wasn't really the most important thing to me. There were other things that mattered to me more. And so what does matter to me is that the work that I do and the work that we do in my organization. So I work for a small nonprofit in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm in Connecticut now. It was much more important to me to talk to practitioners. And so all these articles on this, you know, that first chunk there, they're all in practitioner, they're really education magazines, you know, they're not, I mean, I don't want to sound like it's not hard to get published because a lot of people submit to them, but they're not peer reviewed, you know, they're very much written for practitioners. They're between 2,000 and 3,000 words. No, it's a very different kind of beast, but it still is hard. So I put on here the publication pipeline, and I'm just going to click on that to bring that up. Can you still see that?
Yes.
It says articles submitted and or published.
Yes, thank you.
So what I want to point out about this is that all the first ones that we wrote were all rejected. Right, so the ones that are on my publication list are the ones that were actually published, and those are actually the most recent ones. So clearly we got better at publishing, right? So me and a couple of colleagues, so there are now like 3 or 4 people that I've published articles with. So for me, that was a big deal, was having people to do it with. And partly that was just to spread the workload, right? I think partly I find it easier when there's someone to talk it through with, but a big chunk of that was really just someone to help carry the load. So most of the things that I've done have been like, these are the more coaching focused ones. Just because I want to tell you the story of just how cool things happen, right? That opens up windows, and you end up connecting to people that otherwise, don't know that would happen. So in the middle there, the principal, that's Kenesha Slowly. I wrote a little vignette at the beginning of this article just to kind of illustrate the point of the article. And I was in spring break with my kids in Seattle, and I got a phone call from, this was after the article had been accepted for publication. And the editor called me and said, the principal that's in this vignette at the beginning, do you think she'd be willing to have her photograph taken? And so I said, well, I don't know, but I'm happy to call her. And so I kind of knew how this was going to play out. So I call her, and she's on spring break in Connecticut. And she just started squealing on the end of the phone because this was exciting, right? So they ended up putting her on the cover of the magazine. So, she and I have this joke that, I never really expected to have a cover story on a national magazine, and she never expected to be a cover girl on a national magazine. And it was just cool, right? Her mother friended me on Facebook, and I, all these posts and on how ecstatic that her mother was in Jamaica, actually. Kenesha's from Jamaica. It was just a cool thing. So the other things that I've written, I do write. This is, I don't know what it is really. It's, I write it as a newsletter, and then it gets published on our website as a blog. God, I would love for you to sign up for this too. And you could put your email in the chat, and I'll add you if you like. This is really, to me, this is the best of what I learned at fielding applied to my field, right? So I work with coaches, and mostly instructional coaches, but also leadership coaches and teacher leaders, assistant principals, principals, and superintendents. And so I write about ideas in organizational development and in coaching psychology, and I try and apply them to the kinds of work that coaches and teacher leaders and building school district leaders are doing all the time. And so this is really, the best thing about this is because you do get feedback frequently. So I write this a couple of times a month, and I get emails from, so now this is like, I don't have all that many subscribers in other parts of the world, but there are people who get this in South Korea and South America and Germany and India, and I think there are a couple in Egypt. And so to know that you're having this conversation with people who do actually reply, you know, and appreciate the things that I've written is just fabulous. And it's what has really helped me think of myself as a writer, as opposed to someone who writes something occasionally, but this has sort of become part of who I am and what I do. And then the other thing that I write about is strategy and strategic planning. So this really comes out of my experience as being a school level leader and district level assistant superintendent, and knowing how pointless a lot of the plans in education are. And so this is kind of another story that speaks to, you know, the engagement piece and how important it is to connect with other people. The article on the left was published in the Cap'n, and I love this article dearly. And around the same time as I got this published, I read a report written by Jenny Weiner, who's a professor at UConn, and it was this pretty critical report that she'd been commissioned. So she led a team at UConn to write this report about the plans that were being submitted to the State Department of Education that were required by low performing schools and districts, turnaround schools, and they're called Alliance districts. And I read this and I thought, boy, this is just going to be really unpopular. I bet she's just having a hard time right now. So I just emailed her out of the blue, and because I thought she was right about a lot of these things. And so I just emailed her and I put in the subject line, "You've won a puppy," because I knew that everything else that she was getting were brickbats. And so we had coffee, and she was just so grateful that I had reached out, and we talked and decided we were going to write a book. I know that sounds like a little weird, but that's exactly what happened. So we put together a book. Well, actually, let me just back up, because I think what other people have said about the process is really important. So for me, I wasn't really the sharp end of that. Jenny went to AERA and in September of 2008 when I started at Fielding. And he was kind of making the point that, you know, it is enormous, and you just got to think of it as something that you can just chip away at. And it's very easy for it to get away from you very quickly. There's this gap that can open up. It took me several months, I think, to really understand the value of this advice. So actually, I think I just avoided academic probation by, you know, I don't actually remember what happened that I wasn't on academic probation, because I kept waiting for my calendar to clear. I kept waiting for there to be time, and there isn't. And so, you know, if you don't have a way to just keep at it and keep at it, then it's just, the gap's going to open up. And so to that end, I keep a notebook. I have them all here. I put them off the shelf, you know, and they're just, you know, just tons of writing of things that I read and thoughts that come across my mind. And I just use it as a writer's notebook in the way that we teach students to do that, so that when there's some opportunity to write that comes up, because you see some request for submission from a magazine, that I have something that I can then mine. I can go back to and look through and say, okay, do I have anything here? Is this something that I'm interested in? So, you know, I was getting through these at about the rate of one a year. And then after COVID hit, I've been getting through them a lot faster. The last one I took me 6 months to get through because there was so much going on. So it's this idea of, you know, the writing being a practice rather than an event. And once, you know, so now actually I do quite a lot where I'm responding to particular requests for something to be written, but I feel like I've just got this big bank to draw on because it's something that I engage in all the time. the way you see the problem is a line that I got from Peter Senge from The Fifth Discipline. I talk to a lot of people who see getting published as a technical problem. You know, well, I don't know where I should publish, you know, I don't know how this works. And to me, that's not really the problem, right? The problem is whether or not you see yourself as a writer and see yourself as someone who can do these things and can contribute. So I know that was a shift for me, but I do remember like the day when I realized that, you know, I was working on one thing and my idea of taking a break was to go write something else. And that was a kind of a big moment for me. Another big moment for me was when I got that article published in the Kaplan, and I got an email in response from an editor of another publishing company who wrote to me and said, I really enjoyed your article. I suspect you have more to say. We'd be interested in entertaining a book proposal from you. And we already had a contract with Routledge by the time that he wrote me that email. But I always kind of had felt like Jenny had gone and done that. Like Jenny, it was really Jenny who'd made that contact, and Jenny who'd got us that that contract. And so to have someone contact me and say, and that I was the sole author on that article, and say, you know, we like your work, that felt different. It was actually extremely encouraging and helpful to have him reach out to me. And then, you know, hang out with other writers. I think I started off with the benefit of being married to a professor, and I don't think that's actually helped with the writing so much as it's helped with breaking down the barrier of how I think about writers. I think we sort of idolize this idea of being a writer, but you know, he has to eat and sleep like everybody else. You know, he's just a normal person. So that's one thing. But I think the other thing that I've learned from watching him is how strategic he is. He's thinking several projects down the road. It's not just about getting this one thing done. It's about having a whole layout of what he wants to accomplish in his writing, and how these projects are related to one another. And so that was very important to the way that I thought. So the strategy book that's coming out in December, we already started working on. It's not exactly a sequel, but it's a book about coaching, but not coaching as in here's how to coach, but coaching as in here's how to make sure that if you are a school or district that employs coaches, that you're actually making coaching a valuable part of your strategy for improvement, rather than just kind of this random act of helpfulness. I could talk a lot about that just on its own. And so it was important to me to get the strategy playbook written before embarking on this other book on coaching, because I saw the strategy playbook as foundational to the book on coaching. So I'm still impressed at myself that I even managed to think like that. But that's kind of where I am now, is well into this process of writing the next book. Okay, Annabelle, thank you.
Isabel, we're two Bells, Isabel and Annabelle.
Bells, that's right.
And you are definitely beautiful, Isabel.
Oh.
Yeah, so, you know, you said I was going to have some cogent questions. I don't think you used the word cogent, but anyway, it's amazing all that you're publishing and the vast array, like kind of organization, newsletters, a blog on your nonprofit's website. And even though you don't like conferences, I have to say I don't really care for them either, but you're collaborating You know, you
Yes.
reached out to that person. But I'm interested in that chart you showed earlier where you had all, it's amazing you keep track of it all too. I think, you know, when people write me nasty letters about what I'm trying to publish, I kind of get rid of them. But so what did you think you learned from the early days when you were rejected to just starting to bang out those publications?
I think I'm not sure I learned anything because I don't think I had really I don't know, I don't like using the word muscle as a metaphor. I'm not sure it's really accurate, but I don't think I'd really just internalized this idea that it's a process, right? The goal, getting published is almost a byproduct of the effort that you put into the process. And so, you know, I think there's so much of that that's true, right? I mean, you don't get to be, yeah, I just see it as really about, I'm not sure lowering expectations is right either, but I've managed to reframe it as the goal is not to get published. The goal is just to keep going, right? The goal is to churn away at it and just keep at it. And then of course, when you are published, your perceived self-efficacy just takes this big leap. And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. Yeah. I can do this. And you forget what it was like when you still thought it was hard.
Right. And it sounds like practice is a really big part of that. Practice is a very good part.
I think so.
I mean, I'm blown away by these 4 people. I don't know if the rest of you are, but it makes me really proud that I work for Fielding. So it's so we have some of our presenters turning on their cameras. Is there anything, and those of you who are with us, thank you so much. And if you have questions, you can start putting those in the chat and I'll monitor them. And presenters, who would like to say something at this point?
I would, you know, what's interesting in my story was when I met with this Lynn Curry because of this book, she got me on this publishing a book journey. And we went to conferences to test the idea. We went to book publishers to talk about it. We did that horrible proposal, which I agree with Carrie. Oh my goodness, it takes forever. You spend more time writing the proposal than writing the book. And in the end, someone beat us to the publication.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Marcia. Carrie, Christina?
You know, the other thing I would argue is that I think if you want to write anything, whether it's a journal article or a book or a blog, you have to actually write. And so, you know, I write because I enjoy writing. And, you know, you have to be in the practice of writing, whatever that might look like. And I think how you start that, I agree with our last presenter, you don't write with the end goal of getting published. You write because you have something that needs to be said. You write because you need to. You write because it's who you are. I know, I mean, I've had a blog for 7 years before I even got published. It's just, you just write. And so that would be my best advice is write. For your own soul more than anything else.
Yeah, writing's not easy. I always say, well, you know, Ernest Hemingway committed suicide. So, you know, we're not committing suicide as writers, but it's not like, it is a drive to communicate something, to express something that's important. Christina, did you have something to say?
Oh, I just was going to say, I feel like I love that I got to learn from all the other people who just spoke, and that feeling of like a social responsibility that Carrie talked about, and then just feeling like there's interest in your topic. That's really cool and affirming, and it just makes me think of like, should I be writing a book? And I never saw myself as a writer, but I don't know. I mean, it is a cool experience to write and go through that and learn a new skill, especially if it wasn't a natural skill. I always wrote poetry, so it's like I still feel like a writer in that realm. And I really I learned about the conferences. I go to a lot of conferences, and that's how I helped narrow down my dissertation topic, was like by talking about it. So that was really cool to hear about, like, how do you test ideas in the conversational way and just see people asking you questions. And then what Isabel said about see yourself as a writer, I think, and seeing yourself as someone who can contribute, that really spoke to me too. So it's just cool to get the motivation for that, and how we're always fighting our own little demons, and how we, see ourselves as, there's validation of like all that we've done, but really seeing ourselves as that is a continual practice. So I just learned a lot from each of you and feel more motivated. So I was just going to share that.
Okay, so let's switch to questions. We've got one for Miranda. I feel like I'm on NPR or something. Marcia mentioned something about who to help with rigorous editing. Is it a firm or individual? What is the contact info?
So that was Professor Tojo Thatchin-Carey with Fielding. And I don't know, Annabelle and David, is he still sending out the invitations for the International Conference on Management Cases?
Well, no, I don't think she's talking about, the rigorous edit. When you submitted to the International Management Case Study, they edited your paper. So Miranda, what happened there is she submitted it to this conference, they accepted it, and then they edited it. Tojo Thatchin-Carey was a very esteemed professor with us, and he had some administrative stuff with his home institution, George Washington University. So he's not with us, but you know what I'm thinking, Hillary, is we can create a mail out to all the participants. We have their emails, correct?
You do.
Yeah, so I was actually looking up that conference while you were talking, because I wanted to give a shout out to Tojo. So we'll get the name of that conference. So it's once a year in India, and that was the rigorous part, right?
Yeah, it's meant for doctoral students, and so they really teach you how to publish. And
okay,
yeah, like it's really good. And the call is in the spring, and then the conference is the first week of December.
Yeah, it's called the International Management Conference of Case Studies.
Conference, ICMC, International Conference of Management.
ICMC, let's put that in the chat so you can actually look on. Okay, and David, you had your camera on. Did you want to say something there?
Oh, just briefly, the founder of that conference passed away, and Tojo kind of backed away from it. So I'm not sure to what extent it's similar, Marcia, to when you and others joined. However, I echo what you and many of the speakers have said here. Go to conferences, because that's a great place to locate co-authors and see what the trends are. And as a student, you can get a cheap rate to join the conferences and the registration for the annual join the associations and the registration for the annual conference.
Okay, we have a question from Lisa. Can you both self-publish and have a traditional publication? Does one potentially impact the other in terms of perception, likelihood of being published in the future? Well, there's the issue of copyright. And as often journals and book publishers often want you only to submit to one place, and then they reject you, and then you go on to another. But if you self-publish, you would hold your copyright. I see someone else had asked about ISBN. I had a nonprofit, we published a lot of books, and there's a procedure, it's a federal thing about applying for ISBN numbers. But if you really want to go to a publisher, I wouldn't self-publish first. What do you all think? This is for books, I think we're talking about.
I don't know. Carrie should speak to that.
Yeah, I don't actually think it's a choice. Like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go the traditional route and get a publisher. You can attempt. That's the choice you're making. You're making the choice to do the book proposal. You're making the choice to get that proposal, you know, done. You're making a choice to build your own platform. You're making a choice to build basically an advocating document that says to a publisher, you should publish my book. So that's the choice you're making. And then you have to decide how long you keep trying until you say, I want to maybe self-publish. So if it's not so much, should I do one or the other? It's choosing where you put your energy at first. And if you want to self-publish, I agree with what Annabelle said. It's not the same as it was even 10 years ago. There's a lot of credibility in self-publishing. And it also depends on the process you go about doing it. So, you know, do your research, and there's a lot of great articles on how to self-publish and the best way to do it, and it compares and contrasts. And so I would definitely do that research. But I do know in my book proposal, they asked me if I had published under another publisher or if I had self-published. So it is probably something a publisher will weigh if you chose to self-publish first.
Isabel, did you have something to say on that?
No, I feel, I mean, we really had an easy path getting a publisher. So yeah, the self-publishing thing just never occurred to me, actually. And I'm not sure I would have had the wherewithal or the stamina to do that.
Right, and as Carrie said, you don't really make money publishing. I mean, unless you're someone like Kathy Reichs or some mystery writer that's popular. But a publisher does help. They do the ISBN for you. They put you on Amazon. They put you in all their publications. They often go to conferences like my publisher, Jessica Kingsley. They will have a table at different conferences. So that's the thing. And Miranda, I'm not really going to bring up the ISBN number, but you can find out how to do it. It's probably, you know, just go to Dr. Google. You go through the government, the US government copyright office, and you apply and pay money, and they give you some numbers. Okay, so we have one from Ingrid. I appreciate each speaker said that identifying your goals is important. Then figure out which medium matches your goal, article, blog, book. Can you recommend other ways to identify your goal? Ingrid's got her camera on. Do you want to amplify that question at all?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your presentations. I'm Ingrid Greenberg, and just yesterday I submitted my dissertation to ProQuest. So yay.
Yay, congratulations almost. Oh, you are Dr. Greenberg if you submitted it to ProQuest.
Yeah, and I want to thank Dr. Jenny Edwards, who is my dissertation chair, for all her hard work. So I actually was in my journal just now as I was listening, I took a few notes like, oh yeah, that's true. What are my goals? And I really have like 3 goals. I want to publish an article that educational leaders can point to my research supports the notion that there should be ample funding to create sustainable professional development for online teaching for faculty, teachers, instructors.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Ingrid, but we want to have a lot of people talk. So
okay, but anyhow, I want to publish an article and a book, but like, can I do both? I don't want to like have copyright issues and other issues, or should you do a journal article first and then a book, or you just have to
okay. If it's okay with the group, I'll answer that kind of quickly. I have a colleague at Clinical at Fielding, and she talks about after you get your dissertation, it's like you start slicing pieces of the salami. So you can slice up what you're doing and you can publish in different journals. I think if you want to improve academically, you should start with your journal article, because that's going to help you get a further academic reach. if Carrie said, you know, she had all these stories and she wanted to get those out in the world. So I think maybe I personally would say a journal article and then a book, but if you really want a popular book or at least a practitioner outreach, I go with a book. Is that okay, Ingrid? Yeah. Okay, so do we have any, let's see. How do you go about seeking out a publisher editor? Well, I think those are two different questions. There's people that you can hire as editor. Carrie said she hired an editor. I think Christina, did you post an editor too?
Oh, yes, but I have only worked with her in the world of social justice, and she also does editing on the side. So I can
Right.
vouch for, yeah, but not for our article.
How did you find your editor, Carrie, for your book?
I found her on Upwork, that freelance website. I don't know
Okay.
if you've heard of it. It's upwork.com. And I just hired her, and she
Yeah.
did great work for me. So it was a little bit of a risk. I didn't really have a lot of referrals. So I found her just by doing basically a search.
Yeah, in my last book, you know, I'm not a very detailed person. You know, I'm a big picture person. And so before, I mean, I had the book proposal, it was accepted. And then I had the manuscript. And so I hired more of a journalistic editor just to make sure, you know, in terms of run-on sentences and punctuation, that kind of thing. It was just someone I kind of networked with in my own town. How about a publisher? A publisher is a really different story. And so finding the right place to publish, I think is huge. Because I think when I first got my PhD, I thought these good journals, I want to publish in that journal because it's good, or I want that publisher for my book. And over the years, I've developed this inductive approach where I find things, either a journal article or a book, like I might want to write. And that's the way I start. But you can, who was it? Oh, I think it was Marcia said she had these areas of either the methodology, like phenomenology, or the content, like health education and higher education, medical education and higher ed. So I think the best route for me, you know, I'm kind of multi-epistemological, so I don't really fit. You know, in my grad school, it was behavioral psych, and we knew what journal we would publish in. We knew what conference. I mean, it was a straight apprentice model of academia, and I have extended my horizons, so I don't really fit, but an inductive process works for me. Any other comments from the panel?
I would argue that the best approach, I think, in finding a publisher is figure out your genre of book. You know, I had a specific audience for mine. I wrote a book on women in leadership. And so who's publishing women leadership books? And, you know, what's their focus? And so, you know, you find sort of, that's the other thing your publisher's gonna, in your book proposal, they're gonna say, who's a similar writer? If your book is on a library shelf, who's the books right next to it? And so that's really good research to do. What do those books look like? What do their covers look like? You know, how are they displayed? And so there's a lot of comparison that I did in order to figure out the right kind of, and my agent did that work for me. But when I was self-published, when I was thinking about self-publishing, that was what I was doing.
Yeah, it's like comps when you're selling a house, like what are similar houses? And you do need a genre. Like I had a good friend that had an agent and went on for years, and she finally found a genre of personal memoir. And then she did a lot of journalistic work and outside, so, you know, wilderness. So she found this specific genre. Any other comments about finding a publisher? Isabel, your mic's off. Did you? No. Okay.
The only thing is that if the conferences that you go to, you will find the publishers that speak to those audiences there. And that's a really good, that's where we did most of ours, talking to publishers was at these conferences. And you can hit a whole wide variety of them.
Okay, we have a question from Carla. Can anyone speak to ownership of content published in journals, to utilizing that content in book publication? Well, the journal has the copyright of the article. So you can't use it unless you get permission from the journal to use it, right? But you know, you can always rephrase things. I know I was giving a talk in London at this health education conference, and the deadline really came up fast. And so I kind of repurposed another article, and actually I was using some exact paragraphs, and they found it, which I actually approved of them for finding it. It was a cheap shot on my part. So I rewrote it. So you can have the same content, but it can't be exact at all. Any other comments on that one? Okay, I'm going down the questions. How do you go? Oh, we did that one. We got a lot of congratulations. Yay. So Cliff is here, and he got a shout out from Isabel. Dr. Hurst. I recently published on behalf of a research institute for which I'm a director 2 edited books of previously unpublished manuscripts by the late philosopher Robert Hartman. Oh, advising us throughout this as a publishing consultant. I recommend him. So Hillary, will you help me save the chat so we can collect all these recommendations?
Oh, I will. Gotcha. I got it.
Okay. Cliff, congratulations on that. You want to show your camera so we can say hi? There he is. Hi, Cliff.
Sure, thanks. And so this is kind of a hybrid between an editor or editor or an agent, and self-publishing. And that is a publishing consultant who has the imprint, who can get the ISB. He got our books on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. He's been a terrific help in everything from designing a title and so forth. Fortunately, in the Institute, we had a graphic designer who did the layout and the cover design, or else you can pay a lot of money for those. So I'd recommend, ever since self-publishing came out, there's now a continuum. It's not either or.
Right.
And someone like Tim is someone in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, some publishers also will want you to get something to a certain point, almost camera ready. It sounds like that's what you did for your.
Yeah, or he would offer a cover designer for X dollars.
I see.
Or
so he was
an
like
interior layout designer for X dollars. He would facilitate all of that. We happen to have some good editorial skills in our institute. We had some good graphic design skills. So he let us use those and say, but he worked with us.
Okay, well, it's wonderful. Congratulations on the book, and
Thank
I
you.
hope through the alumni network, Hillary put a shout out. Gee whiz, my mom was a speech teacher. What's going on with me today? She put a shout out for the alumni organization, which is free, and hopefully we can publicize a lot of these great things. Jenny's got her camera on. Did you want to speak, Jenny?
Yes, you were mentioning saving the chat. All of you can save the chat. There's a box on the right side at the bottom of the chat, kind of a square with 3 dots in it, and just click on that and click on Save Chat, and it will automatically save to your computer when you
Thank you.
when you log off.
Okay, now we have some more from Lisa, I think. I think you have 2. I've seen the last one. Okay, Lisa, a shout out to Lisa. She's such an amazing student with us. And of course, all you on the call are amazing students, but she facilitates the Bay Area cluster and makes it available to alumni and current students, globally. Okay, Lisa says, would you suggest any particular tools, apps, and resources to retain and organize ideas in addition to notebooks? Balancing work life, writing effectively as PhD students overall. Then she has a second question, but I'll see. Does anyone have any apps they use other than writing in journals?
I use Grammarly. I think probably many of you, if you're students, have already probably used some sort of, tool to help you write better. That was a big saver. The other thing is my publisher wanted chapters as separate documents. So very similar to how you do your dissertation. You look at what a normal book for your genre, how long it is, and you break it down into chapters by word count, and just one chapter at a time, you do your table of contents. And so that's how my publisher was asking for my material. Every chapter was its own document. And for some reason that felt manageable to me versus this huge manuscript that was going to become a book and some long stream of consciousness. It's just bird by bird, chapter by chapter.
And I think she is also thinking about the thinking process, apps to help. Isabel, do you?
Yeah, so I played with a few early on because there are all these, like there are several, I don't even remember the names, but I downloaded a couple of different things, and the learning curve on using them was just really steep, and I'm just really familiar with words, so I just went back to that. The only other thing I do is a lot of concept mapping, and I just, use an app on my iPad for that. Yeah, that's just figuring it out, and being able to do it visually before writing it is important to me. Just kind of really helps me figure out exactly how everything connects to everything else.
I see Christina nodding. Did you want to add?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, like, just talking with your co-chair a lot to organize ideas like regularly as you get closer and closer. That is really needed. It was for me. And then revisiting your timeline. I wrote at night a lot because I worked full time and I had the kids, so I would have to put them to sleep, and it's painful, but you get through it. I would write like for 3 hours. And often when I was trying to think of like, what's my point here? When I was entering into writing, I recorded myself talking and sent that to myself to hear how I would, in a relaxed state, hear what my topic was. And then also I would, how you get like an idea randomly in the day, I would write those in my notes in my phone and email them to myself. And it just helped to like, get the idea, send it to my email. But I don't use a lot of apps and stuff. And all those things helped me get the ideas and there was always themes in them. And then just hearing myself say it and then writing it down just helped to revisit those.
Okay, and Marcia.
Yeah.
Took off her mute.
No, I'm on. You can hear me, can't you?
Yeah. I was just saying, I noticed you might want to talk. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. No, I agree with Isabel with the concept maps and Christina with talking out loud. Actually, what got me to get it on paper was the book They Say, I Say.
Yeah.
I mean, that really helps you to figure out how to organize it. And actually finding papers I really like to read and copying the case method, right? To copy and steal everything. And more recently, now that I'm reviewing, I've discovered Toulmin's model of argument, which is about making claims, grounds, and warrants. And I'm finding those things are often missing or not compelling enough when I'm reading, reviewing. So I'm exploring that right now, how to use those kind of philosophical argument tools. And even Aristotle, with pathos, logos, and ethos and things. Structuring your arguments that way. So.
Okay, yeah, I teach scholarly writing in the clinical side, and I use the warrant claim kind of thing a lot. Okay, Lisa, you had another question about approaching ASCD. How do you approach practitioner publishers? Like people talked about newsletters that kind of professional newsletters, both Isabel and Carrie talked about publishing. How do you approach like an organization that has a newsletter to publish?
So are we talking about, so like ASCD, there's ASCD Express, and so just getting them so everyone has, everyone in that domain has a page on their website, which is, please write for us, and here are our upcoming themes. And so I track those, right? actually have an alert on my my Chrome. You know, it will tell me when a website changes, and so I'll get an alert saying that, you know, this website has changed. And so I go to the web page and scroll down and see if there's anything that I can write to. And sometimes there's a ton, and sometimes there's nothing. In terms of if you're thinking about a book, again, they have guidelines for potential writers. I think it just, and I've no evidence for this really, except that just knowing that you have already had some contact with them just makes it easier to reach out. You know, so before I would just have submitted something and just kind of like launched it and let it go. But now I would feel comfortable emailing, and because I've dealt with them already, and saying, so I was thinking of doing this, would this be helpful, before I invested a ton of time actually writing something, and I don't know whether they're going to want it or not.
Okay, Carrie, thank you. So yeah, usually most places have, well, if you go on book publishers pages, they say guidelines for authors. And I would think that the homepage of a newsletter might have something like how to submit. But Carrie?
No, that's right. I mean, I didn't submit directly to too many publishers because I had the agent who did it on my behalf. But yes, those I looked at, they have very specific, and it's the book proposal. I mean, basically, the submission that you're providing is a book proposal. And I can't remember how long my book proposal was, but it was, I don't know, it was probably close to 30 pages. It was a 30-page document. So that's what my agent had, and that's what she was pushing to different publishers that she already had relationships with.
Yeah,
Okay,
ours
well,
was,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, our proposal, so Routledge required that we submit, I think, either 2 or 3 chapters. So it was the full proposal, and then we also had to have chapters written before they would, you know, that was a proposal. But the publisher that we're submitting the coaching book proposal to, they're much more casual. It's like, yeah, you know, we don't, you don't have to have any chapters written. We just really, you know, kind of like want to hear what you're thinking. So here's some prompt questions. And it was like, whoa, okay, well, this is easy. So I think it also varies a lot.
Yeah, and you're a known commodity, so they know they want you, right? Well, I think we're kind of,
be lovely.
I think we're kind of winding down a little. I tried to take some notes for some of the ideas in terms of the journal articles, find someone to work with. It sounded where Christine and I really had a good plan there. Collaboration seems to be a concept, either collaborating by going to conferences or writing to people like Isabel did. Matching the journal publisher, make sure that you fit and look at examples of what they published. And I noticed Chris gave a shout out to Keith Melville. He at NSO, he always has that metaphor of if you're at a cocktail party, which group do you want to have a conversation with? So you really have to match that. And what's really helped Marcia is presenting at conferences. She volunteered to be a reviewer. And we did talk about Tojo and the International Management Case Study Conference that Marcia talked about. And I like that Carrie and Isabel both talked a lot about other ways to publish besides journals and books. There's magazines, newsletters, etc. We've talked a lot about the book proposal, and I too have suffered through that. Because actually I write the book and then you have to go back and write the book proposal. But we always have to remember book publishers are in a capitalistic society and they want to sell these books. And so the marketing plan is very, very important. And the publisher owns the copyright. So, I mean, it sounds like it was hard for you, Carrie, but for me, I just think that's part of the biz. But it goes to some of the questions by some of our participants about, can you publish in 2 places? And you can't. And I think Carrie mentioned this, and it's been my experience. You don't really make money from publishing a book. You do it to spread the ideas, and then maybe over time, you can become a speaker, a popular speaker with great fees. I don't know. All right, I'll stop sharing. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
Annabelle, I was going to say it's sort of like a bigger business card is one way of describing a book.
Yes.
And you know, someone said something to me, and this I really cling to this idea. It was my business to do the research because I was called to do it, and it was my business to do the book proposal.
Yes.
It was my business to write the book. Now that the book is out in the world, basically my publisher has said, you know what? It's no longer your business what people think of your book. It's no longer your business if they read the book. You did your business. And whether you agree or not agree, that was really freeing to me. Like, I did my work, it's out in the world, and I'll continue to promote it as I'm supposed to. But I don't get hung up on how's it going to sell and what are the reviews. Like, at some point, you kind of just have to release all of that because your business is now completed. And that's been very helpful for me.
Right. And I think, you know, I was trying to figure out how many books I've published. I mean, none have been big sellers. There was one period where I wanted to be like, I don't know, Meg, what's her name? Meg, whatever her name in organization development. You know, I wanted to go around and be paid to give talks and stuff. But now I look, you know, the articles and the books, I feel like I've had a career, you know, I've done something in the world, and that's been fulfilling. Well, I think we're kind of winding down, and I always like to get out of class early. So I just want to thank so much Hillary first for all the logistics, and Jenny called me, I don't know when it was, but she says, we got to do something on the Rocky Mountain cluster. So she was the catalyst, and she's been really helpful in getting the word out. Thank you, Jenny. And
Annabelle, for taking the lead on this, and for all our wonderful presenters. This was phenomenal. If it's okay, I think we should send the recording to Barbara Mink and have her post it for it to be available for everyone. And
yeah, I had some emails that, you know, someone in India couldn't come because of the time difference. So I've had some emails.
And if
Yeah,
somebody else wanted it. So yeah, thank you. This is amazing.
Thanks, Isabel, Christina, Carrie, and Marcia. And, you know, I often do this closeout like with one word. So I want one word from the four of you. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Just to close out, a word about today in publishing, Isabel.
Wish I'd known this was coming. I don't have a word, but email me if you want to talk, right? I think we all just want to kind of pay it forward. So
pay it forward. I love it.
Pay it forward.
Pay it forward. Christina.
I'll just go with love.
Love. Okay. And Carrie.
Resilience.
Resilience. And Marcia.
I think I would go with passion.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, passion. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. You're the best. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Peace out.
Annabelle, that was great. Sorry I'm not on camera. It's
right.
my Saturday morning hair, but oh my goodness, this was fantastic. You are amazing, and I thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You are a gem.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.